Bev, I'm so excited that you're here because, as I told you, I have been going in a little bit of different directions, learning about all of these people's different stories on my podcast. But the root of that channel is to talk about attachment theory and what it means to people, how we can discover what they are, and how we can become more secure versions of ourselves. And you are an expert on the topic. So thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm thrilled. I love talking about attachment. Let's dive in.
Absolutely. Well, do you want to share like how you got so invested into the topic yourself to begin with?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think like a lot of people who find themselves in this space, it came out of a personal journey. I think we all go through periods in our life where we're trying to figure things out. For me, it was in my early 40s. I'm now 50. So this was a decade ago. And I was trying to figure things out. I had visited multiple practitioners, tried different modalities. I knew that something wasn't feeling good in my body and I couldn't really make sense of how do I get to the other side. And so there were two things that were really helpful for me. One was attachment theory. When I found attachment theory, it was eye opening, almost confronting. I was like, oh my gosh, this explains so much. And then also, I also did trauma therapy, desensitization therapy.
Okay.
And that was really helpful also, releasing trauma within the body. So it was a combination of understanding my subconscious mind and somatic therapy
Oh,
that
wow.
helped me. And then I went even down a deeper rabbit hole into attachment theory. I was like, no one's talking about this. And it was so important for me. I thought we really should be talking more about this. So I pivoted my practice to focus in this area. And the more thankfully now in current times, people are much more aware of attachments, how it impacts us. But we still, as a community, we still have lots that we can learn from one another.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you took an experience and turned it into something that you could create as value for other people. And I think that's where you and I are similar. I also had my own journey of experiences where I was in such a deep rut emotionally and felt so much deep pain being in a connection with another person. And at the time, genuinely believing to my core that it doesn't get any better than this. And to then stumble across theory that actually helped me see myself in a completely different light because somehow there's this term to describe my behavior. And if there's like a problem, then there's a solution and it's tangible.
And you would have learned also that these are a set of patterns, right? So
Right.
we mistakenly identify things as that's just my personality.
Yeah.
That's just who I am. That's just my character. That's just how my mind thinks. And these are all stories.
Yeah.
Really, it's not about character. They're a learned set of patterns that have been ingrained in us young and things that we can unlearn. And
Right.
so it's not a life sentence. It's not okay if you've always behaved in this sort of way or that this is going to be how you behave in every relationship moving forward.
Yeah.
Not at all.
No, I
So
love how
while
you
this,
say it's not a life sentence. That's great.
yeah, yeah. So what's beautiful about it is that again, everyone has an attachment style. So we're not talking about personality disorders. We're not talking about mental illness. We're talking about the way in which we find comfort in building emotional attunement or emotional closeness with someone else, an
Right.
emotional bond.
Yeah.
And this was patterned for us based on our earliest experiences, what we saw, what we heard, what we felt, what we experienced. And that gave us a lens of, okay, this is the world, and this is how I am to interact with the world in order to keep myself safe.
The keyword safe.
Mhm. Yeah. But understanding that we do all of this subconsciously when we're really, really young, we learn very quickly what is acceptable in terms of communicating emotions, in terms of behavior, and we learn what's not acceptable. And we start molding our personalities to keep ourselves safe around the people that we are trying to earn love from,
Yes.
trying to earn comfort from, right? But the amazing thing that because these patterns are subconscious, right? We're not aware of them,
Mhm.
is that all of us as little children, we then eventually, if we're lucky enough, grow into adulthood and these little patterns follow us. And we're unaware. And all of a
Exactly.
sudden, we're behaving again like we're a 3-year-old, but really unaware of why we're doing this long after we have left
Yeah.
our home of origin.
It's so insightful. I actually had a guest not too long ago that explained that as an adult, he saw himself in a fetal position from the moment he was looking down on himself as an adult laying on the floor in a fetal position. But as he was looking down on himself, essentially, he's seeing this moment from when he was taken from his biological mother to his adoptive mother. And that's the first ever memory. And he just saw himself so clearly looking down at that first core memory and just completely falling apart. I found that to be so incredibly important information just because that just speaks to how impactful it is.
So it's very impactful. And I have a similar story. I'm not really going to go into details, but when I was very young, someone very important was taken from me. And that is my earliest memory.
Yeah.
And it's when children experience a level of trauma, it is always impactful.
Yeah. It's crazy. So I was actually going to ask you about because you were talking about it a little bit introductory where you're sharing that we identify with these labels that we put on ourselves. And something that I actually struggled with for a little bit when learning about attachment theories that I almost became victim to my own attachment style that, oh, but I'm anxious. So therefore, or falling on it at least for a period of time until I understood that. But I also have to break the pattern in order to become secure. I had this
Yes.
podcast as an accountability partner almost for that reason. But how do you help people get out of that victim mindset?
Yes. Victim mindset is a trap because it keeps you stuck. Really what you want to do is you want to work towards change. It gives you like a reason for, right? So
Right,
again, it's that's just the way I am, right?
right. Yeah,
But we know that people are capable of change. So the mind is capable of change just in the same way as the rest of the physical body.
right,
So if you, for example, if I wanted to add 5 pounds of muscle to my frame, right? I can't just say, okay, I'm just going to add 5 pounds. No, I need a plan. I need
yeah,
commitment. I need dedication. I need to put time aside to go to the gym. I need to change my lifestyle and eating patterns. There's a whole bunch of things that I need to do, and I can hit the goal.
right,
There's no one who is incapable of hitting the goal. It's whether or not you want to do the work, the goal. Now,
right,
the mind is malleable in the same way. We can make changes
right,
towards our thought patterns and our emotional patterns and certainly our behavior if we want to put in the time, the dedication, and the work to do
right.
that.
Yeah,
The victim mentality, it's everyone else's fault. This is just the hand that I was dealt. It really keeps you stuck. And I can tell you that people, attachment style does change and adapt. Have a core style of childhood, but nobody falls. There's 4 styles, right? Nobody falls smack 100% into
right,
one style. You have predominantly this with a little bit of that, and style can adapt over time depending on your life experiences, positive or negative, and even who you're interacting with. So
right.
you might act a very certain way when you're interacting with, for example, your mother, versus you might act completely differently when you're interacting with a romantic partner.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the idea that it's fixed in stone, that's a myth. The myth. You will have tendencies towards,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about, do you mind talking a little bit about your attachment style and in
Course.
your own journey? What did you discover about yourself?
I guess the first time I was painfully aware that my attachment style was taking the lead in my relationship was when I just found myself to have a complete lack of agency when it came to leaving my partner. I was so anxiously attached to him. It didn't matter that I was deeply unhappy. I was really unhealthy. I had lost so much weight and I was making all of my decisions solely based on whatever would please him any way, shape, or form. And I thought in some twisted way that he was the love of my life and that he would change his mind about commitment. Although he said throughout our relationship that he didn't want to be in a committed relationship, but then we'd break up and then we'd become a couple. And then we'd break up and then we'd meet each other's families. And then we'd break up and then he would always go one step further, which kind of kept me lingering for long enough, right? And that's what I mean when I say I had no agency, because I knew it was detrimental to me and I knew I was unhappy. But the highs were so incredibly high, but the lows were just heartbreaking. So I was a very clear, anxiously attached individual. And when I learned about attachment theory and could see myself so clearly on what I describe as a spectrum, I look at it as like a bell
Mhm.
curve where you have
Yeah,
a secure person and an anxious and an avoidant, and then you have a bell curve shape that is frequencies. So depending on where you fall on the frequency, you'll lean more towards secure or very extreme in one polar end. And I was
right.
definitely on a polar end attracting another polar end. So it was very hard for people to watch. It's what it was.
I'm really sorry that you experienced that. What you are describing is the quintessential anxious avoidant dance, right? And I'm
Right.
sure that you've learned a lot about that. You don't even need to tell me you were dating an avoidant person.
Yeah. Yeah. Here he famously referred to himself as an anti-committal type.
And
To the personality of it all, essentially.
And there is a reason, and I'm sure your research has brought you to this place, but there is a reason that we go after or are attracted to people who, even though consciously you knew better, consciously he told you, I'm not going to commit to you. He
Yeah.
basically told you, I'm going to break your heart.
Yeah. No, several
He
times.
did. He told, but you still subconsciously engaged. So
Yeah.
first of all, let me tell you something about the mind. The mind is guided by upwards of 95, 96, even 97% of our thoughts and emotions and behaviors through
Yeah.
our subconscious mind,
Yeah. Okay.
not our conscious mind. And the conscious mind, our awareness, cannot outwill the subconscious mind, which means that you and everyone else on the planet, even when they know better,
Yeah.
will always go towards something that is familiar. It is not a weakness in character. It is not you should have known better, something to be shamed about. It's not. It's the way our minds are wired because they always pull us towards something that is familiar because your mind knows how to handle it. Your mind is not saying, is this good for me? Your subconscious mind. Is this good for me? Is it not? I'm
Yes.
going to go towards what's familiar because I know how to handle this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're so
So
right. Thank you for saying that too. It's really nice to hear.
yeah, because I'm sure so many of your friends would have said to you, but he already told you, or why did you already knew? Why would you get yourself into that situation? And it feels very blaming.
Yeah, and oh my gosh, every time the shame I would carry on my shoulders every time I'd come back and be like, "Oh, we're back together." Oh, it was embarrassing. It really was. But at the same time, wholeheartedly want to give myself so much compassion too, because my mom would say this to me the other day. She was like, "You were having a perfectly normal reaction to a very abnormal situation. It's like you're reacting because this person is virtually dragging out the worst in you. Of course, you're reacting." And I found it really hard to be able to break the cycle. The only thing that helped was no contact. I had to cut contact completely, and that was the only way. There was no other way.
Yeah. And I'm sure it was extremely
It
painful.
took me years. I tried,
Yeah.
failed, tried again. Yeah, it took me years.
Yeah. It,
3
it
years.
really is the same as dealing with an addiction.
Yeah,
And the same part of the brain that, for example, will go through withdrawal when you're stopping a drug or cigarettes or alcohol, it feels the same when you're pulling away this addictive substance. In this particular case, you were addicted to the dopamine. The dopamine is a chemical that the brain releases, the feel good chemical. So the highs are really high and the low is really low. You got addicted to the cycle. You weren't
yeah,
addicted to him.
yeah,
You were addicted to the relief of, oh my God, we're back together. Everything's fine for the next 72 hours.
Yes. And you know what's so interesting about it too is that when I started dating my current boyfriend, I started preparing for the highs and the lows, like the chaos in between, and then just nothing would happen, and I'd be stir
Bored.
crazy almost.
Bored.
It's supposed to be like some sort of drama. And
Something that people who are anxiously preoccupied do, by the way. You
oh,
might find yourself doing this. You might, I don't know how long you've been with this other person, but you might find yourself picking some fights. You might find yourself trying to stir things a little bit because you're still used to a little bit more drama, a little bit more heat.
he's calling me out too. Like he's such a like he's so steady. He's the
Mm.
kind of guy that is like very like he will sit quietly and observe a conversation, and then when he has something to say, he will jump in and he will say the exact right thing. He's like whenever we're having any sort of argument, like he will be like, okay, now you're just arguing. This is it's no substance, we're going nowhere. What are we trying to accomplish here? And it's like it's just because like I'm feeling moody because nothing very reasonable or logical even happened. It's just a scenario I created in my mind.
Yeah, or if you go back even further, at some point you realize fighting became your way to get attention, or it was your trauma response, or raising your voice is what got you a little bit of attention or recognized. There's always a pattern, right? So as humans, we repeat things that work, right?
Right.
So
Yeah,
there's only, when you break down human behavior, there's really two reasons that we do things, like simplistic terms. Either we're moving towards pleasure or we're moving away from pain. Those are really the only two reasons that we do things in the simplistic of terms.
that's so cool actually when you think about it. Either you're moving towards pleasure or you're working
Mm.
moving away from pain. That is a nice picture when you think about it. If you're just moving towards pleasure, you just notice everything that's beautiful around you and everything that's working. It's essentially a gratitude list.
It's a gratitude list, but sometimes things that bring us pleasure, we don't even realize. So for someone who's been conditioned to argue because it gives them a little bit of attention and it drops a little bit of dopamine, I mean, is pure pleasure. So how are you getting that dopamine, right? So, but again, these are behaviors you may or may not have, but we do find them quite commonly in people who are anxiously
For sure,
attached.
for sure, for sure. With my ex, it was insane. It was unstable, and it took me. I think we're always learning our attachment. We're always learning about how we're showing up in all of these different dynamics. But I think just the key word too was, which we were talking about earlier, was safety, right? Safety for me in this dynamic compared to the older one is so different too, because first of all, we knew each other from before and we had lived together as roommates for a year in co-living space, so we knew each other
Mhm.
differently. And I feel so incredibly safe with him just because we were friends first. So it's a
Mhm.
completely different dynamic here. We have our but each other's best interest in mind when it comes to being friends first and foremost. We really want each other to have what each other want, and we are, in the beginning we were very intentional about figuring out whether or not we could give it to each other. And it's just recently that we discovered that we are choosing each other and are willing to give that to each other. So, of course, when you're with someone who brings out the best in you, you become a secure version of yourself as well. And that has
Yeah.
become the most night and then day experience for me this year compared to when I ended my relationship in 2023. So it's like all of these years shaped me for sure, and they were crucial. I'm sorry that I went through so much pain, but at the same time, I wouldn't have it any other way. The way in which I look at it is that I must have made every right decision to be where I'm at now, if that makes sense.
Yes. Or that your pain guided you to something better.
Yes.
So that pain served a purpose. And that's a nice way to look at it because I am
Right.
sorry that you went through that, right? And I get this question very often. Should I be healed before I go into another relationship? Healing is not a destination. It is a journey. It's an evolution that happens over time and multiple iterations. And so I don't think you're ever healed. And our best studies will indicate that we actually do our greatest healing in relationship to
Right. I
others.
think that makes sense.
And it does make sense because if you're out on your own and not getting triggered by all these things that were once triggering you, you're like, I'm healed, everything's great.
Yeah.
No, it's when you are back in a situation and the same trigger comes up. Do you respond differently? Are you able to stay emotionally regulated? Are you able to take a deep breath and choose a different direction than you once did? That's the indication of healing, not the absence of no longer having any triggers. You will always have triggers. But now that you're in a relationship with a new person, of course you're going to have some disagreements because that's the nature of a relationship. You're never going to be on the same page, but can you respond differently?
Right.
Right.
Mhm.
So, if, for example, your instinct was to, and I don't know this about you, I'm just
Right.
taking an example. If your instinct was to get loud and start to scream, and I'm going to speak over you and become very dominant, and you were a fighter, that's your trauma response. Are you now able to modulate that? Are
Right.
you able to take a deep breath and say, I can feel that I'm getting agitated. I don't want to scream. I'm not going to scream. I just think that maybe I could use 10 minutes to myself to calm down and let's talk about it again. Whatever it is, can
Right.
you act differently now?
Right. Yes, yes, absolutely. And I think
That's healing.
it is. So I think one of the things that I really appreciate about him too is that this happened the other day. He was telling me that when I want something, can I just say straight up what it is and not to hint at it in any way? And then I was like puzzled by it for a second there because I kind of thought that I was doing a fairly good job of speaking clearly and directly. And then it dawned on me that, oh yeah, no, there are certain times when I actually do it. And then I was thinking back to like, when was another situation where I would ask for something that I want or need, and how was I met the last time I did it? Because that is also something that is me being, as you said, you have to expose yourself to situations where you can get triggered. It might just be that asking for something is scary. Being direct is scary because you don't
And
know how the
unsafe.
person is
And
gonna,
unsafe.
yes.
So if you were in childhood, if you were criticized, if you were judged, if you were punished, if you were silenced, if you were all of these negative behaviors for being authentic, for saying, this is how I feel, this
Yeah.
is what I need, this is what I want. If those behaviors will never encourage, then of course you're not going to be direct. In fact, you're likely gonna develop some very strong passive aggressive tendencies.
Yeah, he will call me out when I'm being passive aggressive. He'll be like, he will just say it as it is. He will say it as what it is immediately when it comes to that, because what we are really good at is honing in on what are we trying to accomplish. So we get back to that question a lot. What is it that we're actually trying to accomplish here? And then it's easier to say sorry or to put your ego aside when you recognize this is not really that big. But I remember telling him my mom was raised by a woman who was taught to be seen and not heard. So of course they grew up in a generation where you're supposed to look pretty on the facade, but we're not supposed to hear you. You're just gonna be like our little doll, and you're not supposed to have any opinions, and you're not supposed to speak loudly about them. So it's like I'm
Mhm.
essentially finding myself in a place where my mom kind of just let me let loose, but that doesn't mean I wasn't raised by that and that it doesn't exist within them. So, of course, there's parts of me too that worry that if I need too much or ask for too much, I'm going to be abandoned.
Absolutely. So you're bringing up such a good point. There's attachment styles, and then there's also like
Generational
our
trauma.
society,
Right.
right? And
Yeah, that too.
right. And how we were socialized. And most of us, my generation, I think I'm older than you, but I'll say our generation, so I feel younger. I think we were raised that not to take up too much space. And that actually, that was on a number of fronts. We were raised that in order to be feminine, you needed to be soft spoken. You needed to be more on the lean, petite side. You needed to have soft, wavy hair. You needed to be presentable. Don't take up too much space,
Right.
right? Certainly don't speak your mind. So a woman was to be seen and not heard, just like children were also to be seen and not heard. And
Exactly.
so it depends on your socialization too. That's a whole other layer to this.
Absolutely. So we've unpacked a lot about kind of more anxious side of it all, but I would also love to go a little bit more into detail about the avoidance side of the spectrum. so that we kind of tap into that. And that if someone feels like they don't really know where exactly they fall on the spectrum, maybe we could bring out some specific qualities that will make it easier to identify.
Sure. So it's very similar to what you talked about, the spectrum. So there is a spectrum of insecure attachment styles. On one side, it's anxious, preoccupied, and the other side is dismissive, avoidant. And then in the middle, there's also fearful avoidance or disorganized attachment, which has some qualities of both. But essentially, if a child is not a very young child under 5, if they're not receiving the emotional attunement that they need, they're going to go one of two ways. One, either they're going to become overly congenial and they're going to try to earn their love and please their caregiver. And that's one way that they're going to try to get attention. Or they're just going to say, you know what? No one's coming to save me. It's me, myself, and I. And they are going to become hyper independent. And the child really makes that decision early on. If they cannot trust that love from the parent is consistent or predictable or reliable or safe, they're going to choose one of the two paths that they see as being the safest way to keep themselves,
Right.
safe as a child. And
Right.
so usually what we see as a pattern is those that who are dismissive avoidant generally come out of homes where there was childhood neglect. So they spent a lot of time alone, or there were a lot of children in the home, or the house was very stoic, or they belonged to a high demand religion, or in some cases the mother was very overbearing, or there was a level of enmeshment. Whatever it is, love didn't feel safe, it didn't feel good, it felt hurtful to the child, either the lack thereof or the actual love or comfort. And so the child decides, you know what? The only one that I can trust is myself. And so they develop a set of behaviors that they become hyper independent. They really value their freedom. It's very difficult for them to trust others because they couldn't trust others when they were younger. And so it was never modeled for them. That patterning just didn't develop.
Right.
And so trust is a big thing. It's very hard for them to get into intimate relationships with other people, and they're disconnected from their own emotions. In order to survive that type of environment, you have to be able to learn to disconnect. And so someone who disconnects and sort of shoves down their emotions, not only are they disconnected from their own emotions, usually because they're overly busy. There'll be no one is busier in this world than an avoidant. Okay.
Right.
So they have job is very busy. Their kids take all their time. They have 18 different hobbies. They're always too busy to deal with anything substantive, right? That's always their excuse. But just like they will ignore their own emotions, they will also ignore yours. Not because they're trying to be mean. These aren't mean people.
No.
They don't know how to handle your emotion. They never learned it, right? So again, most of the time these children were neglected and spent time alone in their room to handle things on their own. I grew up an avoidant most of my life. I still have strong avoidant tendencies. And yeah, I can tell you that I have always felt that it's me, myself, and I. It's hard for
Right.
me to rely on other people.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I definitely see so much in my own dynamic when it comes to what you're explaining, just based off of everything that I know of him and how he was raised, and also knowing how he was handling things in real time. Because when the hardest part for us was whenever we were bringing up the topic of, or whenever I brought up the topic of like, where is this relationship going? And,
Yeah, that's
and
the trigger.
yeah, and him, that was clearly a massive trigger because in our dynamic, it was, I wouldn't say that I was the one to raise my voice ever. I would have had to be really mean, like mad, brave to raise my voice. I would rather get really small because he would get really loud. He would get really big. He would say stuff like, this is exactly why I don't have a girlfriend. Now your problems are my problems, kind of thing, when it came to if I needed a venting session or what it might be. But whenever it was the topic of like, where is this relationship going, it was as if everything could have such a lovely moment and be in such a good space, like cooking dinner or in this blissful time. And it would be flirty and a good vibe. But then I felt the need to acknowledge it because that's what an insecure person do when they don't feel fully safe. But at the same time, it's blissful. So it feels maybe like it's the time to open up and the mood would just switch complete full 180, and it was as if like need was breaking a boundary, and it was as if I'd hurt him by doing so, and I couldn't undo what I had just done. Essentially, it was too late.
It's interesting. First of all, I want to say to you that you didn't do anything wrong. You didn't
No,
hurt
of
him.
course, I
You
know
didn't
now.
pick the wrong time. There is never a good time. It's
Yeah,
never a good time, right? So your need for certainty
yeah,
is valid
yeah,
and it's reasonable. But I can tell you without a doubt that the reason he would react with such force is because that question likely put pressure on him and it probably made him feel suffocated.
yeah,
Whether or not he could tell you and use his words, which he may not have been able to, but he likely probably started, his chest started to pound. He might have felt nauseous, like he was actually being suffocated. And so, again, it's possible in these situations we see where there was a mother who was very controlling, very suffocating, then a grown son is incapable of getting into another relationship that demands anything of him emotionally because he's been stunted in this regard. That's one example of enmeshment, right? But your need for certainty and clarity and comfort is very valid. You were just asking the wrong person.
it was actually as simple as that. It was that simple.
But and it unfortunately, it had nothing to do with you because I can look at you and go, "Oh my God, she's beautiful, clearly intelligent. Any man would be lucky to have her." But it's not about you. It's about his limitations.
Yeah, no, when I think back at that time too, we brought out the worst in each other. I'm no saint on the other side. At the end of it too, the way that I look at it as well is that that version of me too, he was a mirror to me and I was a mirror to him in many ways. We attracted each other. So I'm not to sit on the other end of that and disclaim myself as anything better than or anything, but it is true that we were better off without each other and that it was a painful process to arrive at that truth because the highs were so high, but at the end the lows were too low and we couldn't keep going essentially. And yeah, it was really confusing because he was so much older than me too. He was 15 years older than me, and obviously that in itself also just screamed attachment issues. Like I learned that too pretty quickly. So it was a
Right.
lot stuff.
Usually people who are secure or mostly secure will gravitate towards long-term partnerships.
Yeah,
They're usually married earlier on. By the time they're 30, 35, they're
yeah,
married, right? It because they see the world through the lens of connection. They want to have those relationships in their life, so they actively seek it and they find other people who also want to have that type of lifestyle.
yeah,
And by the way, I'm sure you learned this also. Attachment styles are not gendered.
right.
So, and I think you were mentioning you were more on the anxious, I'm more on the avoidant. So it's not just about 50-year-old men who have never been married, 50-year-old women who have never been married too.
Yeah,
Oftentimes, that's simply because they don't want that lifestyle.
yeah,
It's not, they could have had it years ago if they had chosen it, but they took a different path.
yeah. No,
So, yes,
yeah. And I think that's one of the most important thing that came out of it too, is that I actually, for the first time in my life, coming out of that, dared to say what I actually wanted, what I wanted from a relationship. Like I've always known that I wanted to get married, and that was the one thing I was like non-negotiable on. But for a moment there, I was even like considering not having kids because he didn't want it. But now I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm so happy I didn't settle for that because I definitely want to be a mom one day. And to lead with that when going into dating again, like being incredibly clear about what I want so that I know for a fact that whoever's choosing me is walking down the same path with me. And that was very important to acknowledge when starting to
I'm going to I'm gonna just rephrase one quick thing as a
right.
final note, what you said. So whoever is choosing you, Maggie, you're doing the choosing. No one's choosing you. Whoever you are choosing to be your life partner is on the same page with you. You
Exactly.
guys want
Yeah.
the same things.
Yeah.
So as an anxious, preoccupied person, you will always look at it as someone needs to choose me. And I'm trying to reframe that.
Yeah.
That's your lens.
Yeah. No,
I
you're
don't
right.
even think you realize that you said it.
I didn't actually. It's funny because just recently had this kind of conversation around the whole topic of like choosing each other. So it's just so front and center. But of course, comes back to at the end of the day, you're choosing each other, right? So it's not necessarily something that needs to be looked at as like bad or needy, even. At least that's how I've looked at it before. Whereas now I definitely feel like you have to do it two ways, because when I was the only one choosing, it was super painful. But
Yeah, of course.
when you are in love with someone who's in love with you back, then it's real easy to do the choosing. And it's nice to be in that situation.
Yeah. So I always say to people, you choose yourself, take time to get to know your own needs, learn how to communicate that, and then find someone that you're compatible with,
Yeah.
that you want to walk down a similar path in life. Both see yourself living in one part of the world, having a few children, these big sort of things. I'm so glad that you realize that, okay, giving up on being dream motherhood, you would have sacrificed that if you
Right.
stayed with the other.
Yeah.
And that is, for most people, that's just too big of a sacrifice.
Right. Yeah. No, it is. It is. And yeah, it took a while to get out, because you know what I also learned in the process of making this podcast that was unknown to me? It's just predominant limiting beliefs also become, you have these beliefs about yourself and you don't always know where all of these voices are coming from. But a lot of it was also daring to actually be like, oh my gosh, I'm actually worthy of everything that I want. I don't have to earn it. I don't have to work for it. The more I do isn't going, the amount of things on my checklist are not going to be the thing that is determining whether or not I get to want the love that I want. And so,
Exactly.
yeah, that
Ah,
became
this is
yeah.
such a great place to sort of
Yes.
end because, yes, you don't have to earn love and you're absolutely deserving of the things that you want in life. You seem like an absolutely lovely, warm, caring person.
Thank you, Bev.
And I know when the day comes, you will also be a terrific mom.
Oh, thank you. Oh my goodness, that's so sweet. I'm so excited about it. I get to play around with my nieces now, and that's a blissful start.
I love it. I have to tell you, it's, I would say secretly, it's not so secret anymore. I'm a little bit loud about this. I cannot wait to be a grandmother.
Oh my
I
goodness.
can't wait, which is crazy. My kids are in college right now,
Yeah.
but my partner's kids are a little bit older and getting
Oh,
married and a little closer.
yeah.
He's older than me. I just can't wait.
Oh my goodness. That sounds so much
So,
fun. I'm excited for you. I hope it happens. And thank you so much for being on my podcast and for sharing your expertise with us and for having this conversation with me. I really, really enjoyed it.
thank you. Me too.